Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me.
Denver rain came in sideways, smacking the kitchen windows while I basted a pork roast and watched the clock like it owed me money. The doorbell hit hard, one of those rings that punches through the house. I wiped my hands on a towel and went for it, already irritated before I even turned the knob. My name is Colin Mercer. I was 34 when this happened. I'm 58 now and telling it straight. I lived in Denver then, in a house with more square footage than sense. 2 uniforms stood under the porch light, soaked and tight-jawed. The older one had a square face and eyes that didn't blink much. His badge said Morales. The younger guy, Kent, couldn't get his elbows to settle. Rain dripped off their caps and pooled at their boots. "Mr. Mercer," Morales said, voice steady like a ruler. "There was a serious wreck on County Road 17. The vehicle is registered to your wife, Lena. First responders reported no signs of life. Identification is still pending." For a second I was empty. Then heat crawled up my throat, and I swallowed it like bad whiskey. "You have the wrong house," I said. "Lena is upstairs resting. She gets migraines when this kind of rain hits." Kent glanced at Morales, then at me, then back at the rain, like the weather might fix it. "Sir, we need to confirm," Kent said. "It's procedure." "Fine," I said. "Follow me." We climbed. My boots were loud on the hardwood I paid for with 10 years of grit. The house smelled like rosemary and pork fat, and it felt obscene that dinner kept cooking while we moved through it. We hit the hall, and I pointed into the master. From the doorway, you could see a shape under the duvet, a neat head of chestnut hair laid just right. Quick note, before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. And let's continue. Morales stopped cold and put his hand near his holster. Not on it, just close enough to make a point. Kent's elbow brushed his radio. I watched their training kick on like a generator. "Mrs. Mercer?" Morales called, softer now. "Ma'am, are you able to respond?" Silence. He stepped in, slow, 2 fingers reaching for the blanket like it might bite. He lifted an edge and froze. The face didn't move. The skin wasn't skin. The limbs were wrong, heavy and dumb, not a person. A mannequin in one of Lena's hoodies, tucked in shape to pass a glance. Morales let the duvet fall. "Mr. Mercer, where is your wife?" His voice had lost the soft edges. I shrugged because I wasn't going to hand him the months I'd spent getting ready. "She lies down in here when her head goes bad," I said. "She must have moved to the guest bath. She does that when the light bothers her." Kent looked around, seeing too much and not enough. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us to the station," he said. "We need to sort this out properly." "Happy to cooperate," I said. I kept my jaw steady and my breath quieter than the rain. Morales scanned the ceiling, the corners, the closet. My eyes slid where I wanted them to. Past him, to the tiny pinhole over the closet rail, where a lens the size of a lentil watched us. I gave it a quick look and let a small grin leak out, just enough to loosen the knot in my chest. Downstairs, the dishwasher hummed like a neighbor whispering through a wall. Through the floor and 2 rooms away, behind the wine racks, a steel door held its note like a low, steady vowel. "Let's head down," Morales said. "After you," I said, stepping back into the hall and guiding them toward the stairs. We moved toward the stairs, Morales in front, Kent behind me, the house creaking like it didn't want company. I kept my hands visible and slow. The banister felt cold under my palm, the kind of detail your brain grabs when everything else is too loud. Halfway down, Morales said, "Kitchen's fine," and I nodded because it was already where I was taking them. I could smell the roast turning sweet and sticky, and I hated that it made the room feel normal. I didn't come from money. My old man walked out when I was 17 and left a dent in the drywall and a set of sockets I still owned. My mother's folks called me a nice kid who'll always be behind, like that was a birth certificate. I learned to weld because heat and steel didn't lie to me. I bid the small jobs first, gates, brackets, farm repairs, then the medium ones, stairs, beams, sign frames. I started Mercer Fabrication out of a rented shed by the rail spur, where trains screamed all night and rats had seniority. By 28, I had 3 crews, a shop in Englewood that made my chest kick when I unlocked it before dawn, and contracts on 2 stadium rehabs that put our name on clipboards I didn't even have to carry. By 32, on paper, I had a net worth north of $27.4 million, though it never felt like that when I was scraping slag off a weld in winter. Paper and cash are cousins, not twins. I married Lena Hart the first fall we were ahead on everything, when the bank didn't own my sleep. She had cheekbones that could cut rope and a way of walking into a room like it already owed her. Her mother, Vera, never thought I measured up and said it in 100 little ways. We bought in Greenwood Village because the schools were clean and the streets bent around trees like the city forgot them. I put a basketball hoop over the garage and pretended it was for me, until our boy, Ty, started sinking shots from the sidewalk. He could hit a curveball at 11 like he'd been born with the timing baked in. Family photos looked like we had it handled. Pumpkins in October, fireworks in July, the whole embroidered life. The kitchen talks told the truth. "You're never here," Lena would say, arms folded, hair perfect even on a Tuesday. "I'm building for us," I'd answer, and I meant it, even when the hours took chunks out of us. My partner, Gavin Royce, came in when we were expanding faster than my hands could keep up. He was a handshake I trusted back then. Sharp suit, cleaner nails than mine, 35% of the company, and a nose for deals I didn't see coming. He ordered wine without looking at prices and called foremen by their first names like he'd swung a hammer in his life. Vera pushed legacy every holiday like it was a brand we were failing to buy. She rolled her eyes when I brought spreadsheets to her dining table, patted my shoulder, and called me the help with a title. I smiled because I could take a hit. Later, I added a column to the budget and cut something no one would miss. The calls and smiles changed first. Lena's lipstick went from quiet to loud, colors that announced themselves before she said a word. Gavin's shirts got tighter around his smug chest like he was lifting something heavier than paper when he wasn't. Ty still believed Mom and Dad were a lock, calling out plays to me from behind home plate like nothing could break if you stared hard enough. I kept showing up to his games in dusty boots and a clean cap, yelling counts and pretending the ground under us didn't shift. Vera kept her commentary running like a ticker. "Think about Ty's legacy," she'd say, tapping her wine glass with a ring that cost more than some used trucks I'd welded racks onto. "Your business needs polish," she'd add, a glance at Gavin like he was a miracle she ordered just in time. He'd wink at the room. "I handle the polish," he'd say. "Colin handles the sparks." I laughed along because I used to like the division of labor. It made sense, then it didn't. I watched patterns because that's what kept me from getting blindsided by steel. Lena started locking her phone and announcing yoga like it paid a salary. She wore a new smile that didn't belong to me, and she kept it even in arguments that should have melted it. Gavin's calendar got heavier on afternoons when mine got lighter. Nobody said anything out loud, but the air in our house learned a new language and stopped translating for me. We hit the kitchen, and I pointed to the table. "Sit if you want," I said. Morales pulled out a chair with his boot and kept his eyes moving. Kent took the far side and watched my hands like they might sprout teeth. "Coffee?" I asked, already reaching for the pot and stacking 3 mugs on the counter. I poured the coffee slow so I didn't spill it, set 2 mugs in front of the officers, and kept my own in my hand. Steam hit my face, and out of nowhere I was back in our mudroom. Same smell of wet and soap and lies dressed as routine. One Thursday, Lena had come in 2 hours late, door slamming like she wanted me to hear it. She smelled like a bar trying to hide under a mint. "Strategy dinner with Gavin," she said, kicking off heels like she was clocking out of a shift I didn't know she worked. "It ran long." "Don't start." I glanced at the family calendar pinned to the corkboard. There was no dinner on it. "When did you schedule that?" I asked, keeping my voice flat. She shrugged and brushed past me, already scrolling her phone. I watched her go upstairs and counted to 20 because 20 is enough to keep me from saying something nuclear. The next morning I sat in the Suburban with the radio off and pulled up the GPS history. The route lit up like a confession. It sat parked for an hour and a half in the garage under a boutique hotel off Spear, the kind of place that sells pillow menus. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. My pulse didn't change. I just felt a door click shut inside me, I didn't confront her. I called my younger brother, Trent. He answered on the second ring, voice rough but steady. He had the shake from sobriety, not from fear, and it always made me trust him more. I need you to listen, not react, I said, and laid it out. He let me breathe through it. Then he said, "Don't swing at the first punch, man. Wait for the second one. The second one tells the truth, and it won't take your teeth out." It was his way of saying play the long game. He was right. He usually was. I hired someone who lived in the long game. Jill Knapp came recommended from a contractor who used to wear a uniform before he wore a tool belt. She was ex-military police with a stare that measured people like lumber. She spoke in tight, metered bursts, like every sentence cost money. I laid out what I knew and what I suspected. "Cover matters," she said. "We need reasons to be where we'll be." She showed up 2 days later in a cafe apron, tray in hand, a box of espresso pods and receipts in the other, playing delivery. In under 10 minutes, she tucked a pinhole camera into a recessed light in my office and slipped another into the garage rafters, angled at the side door where shoe prints always appeared on rainy days. She left with a cheerful, "Enjoy the coffee," like she'd sold us a loyalty card. It took 5 long days of nothing but ordinary. Day 6, the mudroom filled up with the kind of proof you don't recover from. The footage showed Lena pressed against the wall with Gavin's hands on her waist. She kissed him like the scene had been rehearsed and I was already dirt. I watched it one time through with the volume off, then replayed the last 10 seconds once. That was all I needed. More would have been self-harm. That night, I sat at the dining table with my ledger open and the calculator lit. I did the math like it was a prayer I didn't believe in. If they cleared me off the board, Vera could march into a courthouse with a smile, push for Ty's guardianship, and bless Gavin to run my company into the ground while calling it stewardship. I pictured Ty's face at 11, the way he tracked a curveball and grinned like the world listened to him. My jaw locked. My hands stayed steady. I didn't rant. I didn't throw a glass. I opened my laptop, created a fresh directory, typed the name Postfire, and hit enter. I stared at the new folder name glowing on my screen, then shut the laptop and took it to the office because sitting still wouldn't save me. Gavin came in 30 minutes later, smelling like cologne and confidence, tossing a packet of change orders on my desk like tips. We were going line by line when his phone, face down, lit up and started playing to the room because he'd forgotten to silence the speaker. "Keyman Insurance, timeline, binder date," a voice said, clipped, like a man who charged by the syllable. Gavin snapped at the screen and fumbled it quiet, cheeks flushing under his perfect shave. He forced a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Spam," he said. "They target executives." "Then block it," I said, pen steady over the margin. I tilted my head like I bought the joke and added 2 mental pins. Keyman, timeline. Jill Knapp sat in my conference room that afternoon with a legal pad and a jaw set like a vice. She slid a printout across the table, black text on white that turned my stomach cold. "Pulled from a cloud backup," she said. "Your wife asked if Noah could move the IDs and whether the pallet jack job would look like a freak accident." She tapped the timestamp. "They're not subtle." "Noah," I said, and a face I knew rolled up. Noah Pike. A fixer who once helped a client on a warehouse fraud we unwound. The kind of guy who could make a tire iron look like gravity. I pulled a prepaid from a locked drawer, punched the number Jill had for him, and waited through 2 rings. He answered like we had a lunch scheduled. "Yeah. This is Colin Mercer," I said. "I want you to flip. I'll pay you triple whatever you've been promised." I named a number that would make a decent man blink and a crooked one sit up. He didn't even warm up a fake outrage. "You want me to ghost you," he said, voice flat as concrete. "No," I said. "I want you to ghost her." He thought for 3 seconds, maybe 4. "You're buying the wheel," he said. "You still might not like the road." "I'll pave it," I said, and hung up after we set a time in a blind corner to trade details. The plan they had built was ugly and efficient. I was supposed to be in our Stapleton warehouse on a Friday at 3:15 in the afternoon, pinned between a pallet rack and a forklift that jumped in a narrow aisle. It would be loud. It would be fast. It would be fatal if the physics cooperated. The payout on my keyman policy was $9.8 million. With me gone, Gavin could run money into shells named like supplements and call it vendor diversification, while Lena learned to cry on command and shook hands at charity nights. I flipped it. I scheduled a fake site inspection across town that would put me on camera and nowhere near a forklift. I had Jill tail Lena the entire day. I told Noah to stage a T-bone near Castle Pines using a decoy car and a little theater. The hit would look messy but survivable to a witness with a shaky cell phone and a story they wanted to tell at dinner. Meanwhile, I brought in a forensic consultant who knew how first reports get written when things are hot and smoky. We sat with my lawyer, Bart Klein, a man who ate paper for breakfast, and worked language for preliminary identification, so it would hold up to a long enough shadow without crossing a line that would bite later. Everything we built had to be clean. I wasn't going to jail for being smarter than two amateurs who thought they were sharks. Trent took the job I couldn't, the one with the face I loved the most. He sat with Ty at batting practice and kept him off our block all afternoon. Hot dogs, sunflower seeds, and stories about the Rockies in years when we pretended they were contenders. He texted me updates that read like weather reports. Skies clear. Kids smiling. Don't screw this up. The basement build-out had gone in a week earlier under wine room expansion, because inspectors get bored when they see money sunk into hobbies. Behind the racks, a soundproof box with a steel door rated so high it made me grin in a way that didn't feel good. I stocked it like we were waiting out a storm. I ordered myself. Water, protein bars, blankets, a cot, a toilet that didn't need a plumber, a clock with no hands. I told myself I was giving Lena the vanish she wanted, minus the sun and the cards. Vera kept pinging my phone like a metronome. Brunch, stability for Ty, links about grieving fathers and executive burnout with bolded pull quotes like I couldn't read. I typed back neutral, the way you answer a nosy neighbor you need to keep on your side of the fence. Appreciate your concern. We're managing. We did a Sunday dinner at her place because refusing would light up every radar she had. She poured wine and looked at me like I was a mechanic who parked in the owner's spot. The metal guy, she said, smiling in a way that bared teeth. Always so practical. Practical keeps roofs from falling, I said, carving into a roast that tasted like nothing. Gavin wore a new watch and made sure every hand at the table saw it. He spun the bezel with his thumb, checked the time like he was syncing with an invisible schedule, then slid a wink at Lena so quick most people would have missed it. I didn't. I filed it. I reached for the salt and passed it to Vera without looking at her. Friday came gray and slick, the kind of day that makes breaks lie and people misjudge distance. I spent the morning laying alibis like floor tile. Emails time-stamped, a site inspector who shook my hand in front of 2 cameras, a receipt for coffee with my name on it big as a billboard. By early afternoon, the sky sat low and mean over the south side. At 2:47, my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Jill. Lena just turned onto Ridgewood. Alone. No seatbelt, I answered with a single letter, because I didn't have breath for more. The wipers beat a steady metronome while I watched the clock crawl. At 2:59, Noah moved. He had the choreography down to muscle memory. A low-speed T-bone that looked meaner than it was. A crunch that made civilians gasp. Then a quiet swap to the decoy while smoke and shouting created cover. Another car rolled in exactly on cue. 2 witnesses with open mouths and phones halfway up, the kind of people who tell stories loud at barbecues. From a block away, I saw the smear of flame and let my shoulders square like a man accepting bad weather. The scene looked unsalvageable to anyone who wanted to believe. Fire and smoke made shapes lie. Personal effects did the rest. Her wallet, a bracelet she wore to every strategy dinner, a smear of foundation on a visor. Our consultant stood where he needed to, fed the right phrases into the right ears, and marked a preliminary identification off jewelry and the wallet with the standard, pending final procedures language. Bart called to confirm the phrasing. "You're covered for now," he said. "Keep your story narrow." I told him I understood and hung up because I didn't want more words in my head. At 3:22, Noah's text landed. Package secured. He followed with a second line. Out cold. No marks she'll notice. I exhaled once and drove home at the speed limit like a man who never broke one. I set the dining room like a magazine spread because lies need props more than truth does. Candles lined up, plates centered, linen napkins cleaned like they were waiting for company. I slid Ty's favorite mac and cheese into the oven to keep warm and let butter and cheddar make the house smell safe. It made me angry that it worked. The knock hit at 4:11, clean and final. I opened the door to Morales, hat in his hand, rein on his shoulders, and Kent beside him with a face that hadn't learned to hide yet. Morales kept his voice even. "Mr. Mercer, I'm sorry to inform you there's been a fatal collision on County Road 17. The vehicle is registered to your wife. Preliminary identification suggests..." He didn't finish, because he didn't have to. My stare went blank without any acting. "Empty finds you if you stand still." "She's upstairs with a migraine," I said fast and firm, like a man correcting a clerical error. "Come on." You can check I marched them up the stairs, boots thudding, turned the corner, and led them into the bedroom where the duvet made a clean outline under the soft light. Morales stepped close and breathed in before he touched anything. Training told him the rubber before his eyes did. He peeled the fabric back with 2 fingers and met a silicone face wearing Lena's hoodie. His jaw tightened. "Mr. Mercer," he said, voice gone flat, "we need you to come down to the station to answer some questions." "I'll come," I said, already nodding. "Give me 10 minutes to call Ty's coach. He's at practice. I need someone to bring him home later." Morales glanced at Kent, then back at me, and gave a short nod. Protocol can be human when it wants to. I walked to the kitchen, dialed Trent, and kept my voice low. "Don't bring Ty home tonight," I said. "Take him for burgers. Make it a long story. I'll explain later." He didn't ask why. He said got it, and hung up to do what needed doing. In the basement, behind that steel door, Lena slept off the last of the ride, sedation making her look gentle and younger in a way that made my stomach twist. I stood next to the dishwasher, filled a glass, and drank water until the glass was dry. The glass hit the counter, and the house hummed like a throat clearing. Then the pounding started under my feet. Flat-palmed, fast, no rhythm, just fear trying to kick its way through steel. I walked to the basement door, flipped the monitor on, and her face filled the frame, eyes blown wide, hair matted to her forehead, like sweat had glued it there. "Colin," she said, voice soft enough to fake sweet, then snapping hard. "Where am I?" "What did you do?" I didn't make her chase it. "Safe," I said, "and very gone." My voice didn't shake. I'd burned that option out of myself days ago. She spun in place, cataloging what I'd built. Clean white walls, a small stainless sink, a cot that didn't look inviting. The door sealed in a way that told the truth without bragging. And the clock with no hands, a circle of nothing that made time a rumor. Her throat worked like she'd swallowed a stone. "You can't keep me here," she said. "I will call the police right now. I will have them drag you out of your own house and put you in a cage." She stepped close to the camera like proximity could break it. "They believe you may have died in that wreck," I said. "They told me at 4:11, preliminary only. They'll keep it careful until they don't have to." I let the words sit between us like a table no one wanted to pull a chair up to. She called me crazy with a laugh that belonged in a different room. Then she cried, not pretty. And then she pivoted hard. "It wasn't like that with Gavin," she said. "You turned cold. I needed someone to listen. It just happened, and then it got complicated." She wiped her face with the heel of her hand and tried to find my pity. "It didn't just happen," I said. "You scheduled it. You budgeted it. You shopped for lipstick to match it." I kept my voice even because losing it is a gift you hand the other side for free. Upstairs, the calls began to cascade. Vera came in first with speed and volume, grief, like a stage show. "Colin, sweetheart, I am beyond devastated," she said. "You must be shattered. I can take Ty for a week. I can take him longer if you need to rebuild your strength. I will handle logistics. You focus on healing." She stretched the word healing like taffy. "I've got Ty handled," I said. "We're staying in routine. He needs that I could hear her inhale for a fight, then choke it back because optics matter. Officer Morales came by again, rain off his jacket, cap tucked under his arm. He left a card on the entry table and spoke steady. "Lean on neighbors, mister. Mercer people will want to help, even if they don't know how. We'll be in touch as we move through the formalities." "I can make coffee to go if you want it," I said, hand already on the cabinet. "I've got containers that travel." He shook his head like a man who knows the value of lines. "Thank you, but I'm on duty," he said. "Protocol's protocol." When the door shut behind him, I went back to the monitor and tapped the feed that showed the living room. "You should see this," I told Lena. "Keep your eyes open." Vera came by with a hug that lasted 3 beats too long, perfume fogging the doorway like a claim. Then Gavin walked in behind her with flowers and a sad face that didn't fit right, like a mask someone else had worn first, and he'd borrowed it late. "He's here," I said, low and clear. "He says he'll take care of the business for me while I heal." She tried to hold her face still and failed. The flinch was quick, but it was there. It felt like a confirmation stamp. She swallowed. "Ty?" she asked, finally finding the only name that mattered. "What are you going to tell him? What is he going to think happened to his mother?" "He'll be told his mom died fast," I said. "He'll be told you loved him. The truth would cut him in a way that doesn't scar right. I wasn't going to let that be his shape." "This is kidnapping," she said, quieter now, like the room was stealing her volume. "You cannot lock me in a box because you're hurt. You cannot make me disappear because your feelings got loud. It's consequences," I said, "for what you and Gavin tried to put on me. For what you would have put on Ty if it worked." I let the monitor carry my words and kept my hands still at my sides. She backed away from the camera and sat on the cot, hands laced so tight her knuckles went white. I killed the audio and left the video up. Her mouth moved, but I didn't need the words. I needed quiet more than anything. I went back upstairs, let the house breathe, and ignored the texts stacking in ugly blocks. I washed the 2 cups we hadn't used, wiped the counter until it squeaked, and checked the bolts on the door that led down. The metal was cool under my palm, exactly like I designed it. Then I sat on the basement steps on my side of the steel and listened to nothing. I stayed put until my legs went numb, and the only sound left was my own breathing moving in and out like work. By morning, my legs worked again, and the next week turned into heat and paper. I lived on coffee, court searches, and spreadsheets, while Ty lived on Little League and Trent's patience. Trent texted box scores and photos of Ty's crooked grin, and I let that be my air. Brett Lang, our accountant, wasn't a mastermind. He was a cautious thief. He'd been shoveling $3.8 million into salt and pepper shells with names that sounded like vitamins and gym gear. Allevium, Cormax, Silverform. Just bland enough to hide in plain sight. I pulled ledgers, cross-checked vendor IDs, and circled the same misspells like they were breadcrumbs a lazy wolf left behind. I sent an agent in a cheap suit. Real name, Carly Dorsey. On paper, she was an outside forensic auditor. In person, she looked like someone who parked in tow zones because she could. She walked into Brett's office with a formal demand letter and a folder that sang, sample invoices, routing numbers, and a copy of the shell tree mapped in red. "You have until noon," she said, "or we escalate and loop counsel." Brett folded in 40 minutes over a turkey sandwich he'd barely touched. He started with excuses, slid into apologies, and landed on names. "It was Gavin," he said, voice damp and small. "He set the shells. He said we'd reconcile after the quarter Carly slid him a recorder and a pen. He gave up account keys, the shells, and an email with Lena's voice on it talking about timing the forklift so no one's around." I listened to the clip in my truck and gripped the wheel until the leather protested. I called Gavin from my office phone and smiled at the blinking red light on the recorder. "We've got a compliance review coming in," I said. "You need to be in at 8 for questions." His panic came through the line like battery acid. "This is a witch hunt," he said. "I need time. I need to clean." He fumbled, and I heard a second line click. He thought he'd muted me. Wash everything, he told someone I didn't recognize. Set up a flight. Not DIA. Smaller. He came back breathless. Colin, you're overreacting. I'm reacting exactly, I said. Be here at 8. I hung up and saved the file twice. I wanted that tape to smell like soap in court. Meanwhile, Vera tried to turn grief into leverage. She filed an emergency petition to grab temporary custody of Ty, citing my unfit state and insomnia a neighbor said they'd observed. Bart and I walked it into court with smiles sharp enough to cut envelopes. We'll need full financials from Ms. Hart's mother, Bart told the clerk. Scope includes her nonprofit. The subpoena pulled her daylight wide. 2 wires sat right there. Money from Gavin's shells to a nonprofit Vera chaired, labeled as program support. Bart slid the printouts to the judge with a neat thumb. The judge didn't blink. Miss Hart, the judge said, looking over the glasses. This reads like gamesmanship. She turned to Vera's lawyer. Petition denied. Warning issued regarding frivolous filings and potential sanctions. Vera's mouth moved, but no sound climbed out. I kept my eyes on the bench and nodded once. Then I gathered the exhibits, tucked the stamped order into my folder, and pushed through the courthouse doors to the steps. I called Jill on the move and said, "Green light." "Squeeze him, green light, squeeze him," I told Jill, and I walked straight off the courthouse steps into the job of keeping heat where I wanted it. Before she pulled the pin, I wanted a uniform to have eyes on my place for reasons that read clean. I called Morales and asked if he could swing by to check on a suspicious van I kept seeing near the corner since the news broke. He parked at the curb 10 minutes later, hands easy, eyes busy, and we talked baseball for 8 minutes on the porch, while the street pretended it wasn't listening. He asked about Ty's swing, and I asked if the Rockies bullpen would ever learn to hold a lead. Then I let nervous energy do the rest. I'm getting traffic I don't recognize since the wreck, I said. People slow roll. I probably sound paranoid. Vera's nonprofit is in the news too, and I keep wondering if there's overlap. I made it sound like an overshare, the way a man under stress dumps details he shouldn't. He nodded like he'd heard worse from better men. We'll loop a patrol by a few extra times, he said. Keep documenting what you see. It helps us help you. He left a second card on the table by the door and told me to call if anything felt off after dark. I thanked him and watched his taillights hit the end of the block before I went back to work. The auditor's letter hit Gavin's desk right after breakfast. At almost the same moment, the compliance flag tripped on a hurried transfer he tried to shove through a regional bank. A real white-collar unit, not the rent-a-badge types, moved in with a tight stack of papers and fewer words than a funeral. Jill texted me a thumbs up and a location, and I drove to his building and took a position behind a pillar across the street, one hand on my phone, the other on cool stone to steady my head. Gavin came out hard like he could outrun paperwork. The real badges stepped in, set hands where they needed to, and read him what they read. He shouted about witch hunts and his lawyer, and something about political climates, and not once did he say Lena's name out loud. That silence told me more than any ledger ever had. He wasn't protecting her. He was protecting himself. Downstairs, back home, Lena watched the arrest on her feed. The camera caught her pressing her forehead to the metal, breath fogging the lens for a second, eyes zeroed in like she could climb through pixels. "Does he know I'm alive?" she asked, voice small enough to fit in a pocket. I let the quiet answer for me, and switched the view back to the empty corner of the room, where the clock without hands kept time by doing nothing. Vera called an hour later, voice pitched like a consultant giving good news. "Colin, I want to advise you on a PR statement," she said. "I have media relationships. I can frame this in a way that honors Lena and protects the brand." I set the phone on speaker, hit record, and kept my tone grateful with just enough crack in it to pass. "What are you proposing?" I asked, and let her fill the air with words like stewardship and continuity and market confidence. She offered to steward the company with Gavin in the short term, like the arrest was a scheduling issue and not a felony. I said I'd consider it and gave her a time for a meeting that wasn't optional. 2 days later, she glided into a conference room with a scarf that cost more than a welder's month and sat like a chair owed her deference. I slid a thin folder across the table, 2 wire confirmations from Gavin's shells into her nonprofit, labeled Program Support, with dates that matched her pep talks. She didn't flinch. She just blinked slow, turned her mouth down and reached for tears like they were in the top drawer. "This is being twisted," she said. "I was trying to help communities. You are hurting, and you're looking for villains instead of healing." "No," I said. "I am looking at numbers. They don't heal." I stood, closed the folder, and let the click echo. Then I walked out and let Bart send her a letter warning her off my son until a better version of herself showed up. I didn't wait for a reply because I didn't need one. The weekend broke clean and blue, the kind of sky that makes aluminum bats sing louder. Ty stepped into a pitch and sent it over the fence for the first time in his life, ball sailing like it finally believed in itself. He jogged the bases slow, shoulders back, like a kid who thinks time listens to him when he speaks. I stood and clapped until my hands hurt. Ty's ball cleared the fence, and the crowd noise fell off in my ears like someone cut a wire. 2 days later, we were at day 11 below, and Lena finally asked for face-to-face. I keyed the code, cracked the steel, and pulled a chair across from her. The air inside smelled like clean metal and fear that had nowhere to go. I sat like a man who was done playing defense. "Why not just divorce me?" she said, hands tight, eyes fixed on my mouth like she wanted to catch me lying. "Take half," I said. "Make Gavin a martyr. Hold the door for Vera to reach for Ty." "No thanks," I let that sit. She understood math. She always had. "You think this is justice?" she asked. Her voice had bite, but it didn't land. "I think this is me making sure Ty grows up with his head straight and my company breathing," I said. "You and Gavin were writing a different ending for us." I tore it up. She stared at her hands so long I could hear the clock with no hands ticking in my head. "What happens to me?" she said finally. "There are 2 paths," I said. "You can stay down here and be a ghost forever. Or you take the exile I already lined up." I leaned in enough for her to see I meant it. "The ghost version is clean and cruel. The exile is cleaner." She swallowed. "Exile how?" "You leave the state under a new name," I said. "I have quiet work arranged, cash fronted, and someone who can put you into a rental without questions. There is no contact with anyone from here. No calls, no letters, no posts. You live small, and you live quiet." She blinked hard and found the only question that mattered to her. "Will I ever see Ty?" "No," I said with no extra cushion. "He believes you died fast. He believes you loved him. That is the only good memory you get to leave him. I am not taking that from him, so you can feel better." She cried then. Not loud, not pretty. The kind of crying that shows up when the last lie leaves the room. I kept my mouth shut because any talking would have cracked something I needed intact. When she finished, she wiped her face on her sleeve and nodded like a prisoner signing for a parcel. "I will go," she said. "I want one thing. Send me a photo of him when he graduates high school." "I will think about it," I said. It was the only sentence I trusted in that moment. I stood, laid the rules out like tools on a bench, and made sure she could repeat them back. I slid a cheap phone through the gap with 9 numbers programmed and 1 number that mattered. "Use it only if you are bleeding or burning," I said. "Otherwise it goes in a drawer." I left a duffel with clothes that would not draw eyes and a pair of shoes that would not squeak on tile. I called Trent from the stairs. 3 days, I said. Dawn, north. He didn't ask anything stupid. "I will gas up the truck and keep the radio low," he said. We mapped a route that kept to long stretches and boring cameras. Jill gave me 2 motel names that forgot faces as a business model. 3 days later, I woke before the alarms and brewed coffee strong enough to stand on its own. The house was blue with early light when Lena came up in a hoodie and a ball cap, duffel at her feet, eyes dry because she had run out. Trent took the keys without looking at her, opened the passenger door and waited until she got in. Nobody said goodbye. The mountains sat on the horizon pretending they didn't see any of it. I spent the day at the shop and at Ty's practice and anywhere that wasn't a window. Dusk finally rolled over the roofs. Trent came in through the garage and set my truck keys on the counter like he was returning a borrowed wrench. "You done?" he asked. "Not even close," I said. He nodded once and left me the kitchen. That night I slept 8 hours without waking. I woke up after that 8-hour sleep and put both feet on the floor like I was planting a flag. The next stretch turned into calendars and invoices, and a boy who kept growing out of his cleats. The business didn't die, it grew. We opened a second shop near Pueblo in a metal shell that baked by noon, then a prefab unit in Cheyenne where the wind never shut up. I hired a COO named Dana Reeves who was smarter than me at the numbers and didn't mind telling me where I was being stubborn. She'd close her laptop and say, "Cash flow likes boring," and I'd nod and let boring make us rich. Years blurred. I lived them before I sat down to tell this. Projects stacked, trucks cycled, welders came up through the ranks, and my phone stopped feeling like a siren. Gavin pled out to wire fraud, embezzlement, and a conspiracy count. He got 12 years, served 8, and walked out under a new haircut and cheaper shoes. I didn't chase him. I didn't need to. A man who has to buy fresh names at a strip mall already sentenced himself. Brett cooperated and moved to Nebraska to be small. Every December he sent me a Christmas card with a snowman or a church on it. I didn't open them. I lined them in a drawer in my office, edge to edge, a white stripe that reminded me how fast people sell themselves for nothing. Maybe I liked the order of it. Maybe I liked proof that he didn't forget what he did. Vera found a new nonprofit to chair, some buzzword salad about leadership and community outcomes. We didn't speak. She mailed Ty coupons for things he didn't buy, scented candles, organic meal kits, discounts at a salon, and called that love. I stopped sending thank you texts because he stopped handing me the envelopes. Ty grew like a weed. First it was a driver's license and me pretending I wasn't gripping the passenger handle. Then a prom where he showed up in a thrift store tux and pulled it off. Then a dorm room 2 states over where he learned to cook eggs and make rent and call me on Sundays to talk about nothing. He'd say, "You ever try cast iron?" And I'd say, "I build with it." And we'd laugh like we meant the same thing. I dated after a while. Nothing cinematic. Coffee and hiking boots and women who had their own jobs and bills and didn't need me to rescue them. We walked trails at Red Rocks and talked about budgets and dogs and what snow does to your mood. Nobody asked to move in. I didn't ask either. Quiet fits better when you earn it. Sometimes I'd look at the basement door, welded shut behind the wine racks, and feel disgust and relief at the same time. It's a lousy combo. I'd check the welds with my eyes like they could come loose on their own, then go back upstairs and set out 2 plates anyway, because habits make you feel safe even when you know better. The summer Ty graduated college, the sun baked the bleachers until the backs of my knees stuck. My cap was backward because I still do dumb things with hats like I'm 18. I sat with other parents in cheap sunglasses and waited for his name to cut through a list of 1,000. The PA cracked, the crowd murmured, and it all felt like a machine that had decided to be kind for one day. Halfway through the ceremony, I saw her in the back row, plain clothes, ball cap low, hands folded tight like she was holding them together so she didn't shake apart. She didn't wave. She didn't cry. She just mouthed, "I'm sorry." The air inside my chest went thin for a second, and then it came back. She broke the no appearance rule. I could have hit the switch I'd put in place for moments like that. I didn't. This was my son's day, not mine, and not hers. They called his name, and he walked across like he knew exactly where his feet belonged in this world. I clapped until my palms stung and whistled once because he always liked that stupid whistle. After, in the parking lot, he came up smiling and taller than me, cap crooked, tie loose, eyes bright like fresh steel. I hugged him hard. "Your mother would have been proud," I said, steady. He nodded. Not because he needed the words, but because he knew I needed to say them. He grinned. "You hungry?" he asked. "I'm starving." That ceremony was a hostage situation. "Let's fix that," I said, clapped him on the back, and steered him toward the truck. Was Colin right, Or did he cross an unforgivable line? Comment below. Please like and subscribe. It's huge for us in just one click.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.